Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this program today I have something a little bit different for you. We are going to be discussing Israel's beautiful nature reserves and wildlife with one of Israel's leading environmentalists. Her name is Faygle Train, originally from Toronto, Canada, but now living in Jerusalem. Faygle, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the Middle East Report.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
And do you want to share with us your kind of extremely interesting family background and tell us what life was like growing up as being Jewish in Toronto, Canada? And your name, Faygle, and you were telling me before the program, is actually a Yiddish name, which does tell me something about your Jewish heritage being Ashkenazi.
Mm-hmm. So I am third generation Canadian. My grandparents, all four of them were born in Toronto area. I grew up in Toronto in the Jewish community, went to Jewish school. It's a very important part of who I am today, why I love nature. Canada is an incredible natural space as well. The Jewish community is very diverse. It's the biggest Jewish community in Canada, one of the biggest in the world. And I remember growing up feeling very much a part of it. A lot of my after school activities were Jewish choir in the synagogue, all sorts of things like that. And as I got a little bit older and I started to meet people from different backgrounds, I realized just how diverse Toronto is, but also how diverse the Jewish community is. And as you just mentioned, my name is Yiddish. My family owned one of the first Jewish bookstores in Toronto. We have a very proud legacy as helping start Jewish libraries and bookstores, and we're very literary as well.
Fabulous, that's a great story. And also tell us where your interest in conservation really came from and stemmed with, and how you developed such a huge passion in conservation. I was surprised living in Canada, having visited the Rockies and British Columbia. I mean, it's an absolutely stunning and beautiful country, Canada.
I would love to get to British Columbia one of these days. I grew up exploring the nature in my own backyard. Literally, we would put tents in the backyard and my father would stand guard making sure the raccoons didn't try to get in and steal our snacks. My father is a huge part of why I love environment as much as I do. He took us camping every single summer. It was very important to him that we respected nature, that we learned about nature, that we understood nature. Not every Jewish person I knew in our community went camping the way we did. We would go for a couple different days. We'd be, really in the backcountry. It was just a huge part of my childhood. I have some of my first memories are being out there, touching dirt, trying to find the different animals under the rocks. So I really thank my father for that.
Amazing. Well, it's a good legacy. And Faygle, do you want to explain that big decision that you decided to, after you graduated from your various degrees you've done, why you decided to make Aliyah in 2010? I mean, anyone would think that Toronto would be a nice, comfortable city surrounded by everything you know, and then literally going to Israel, which is a completely different country, different culture. Obviously used to it because it's a Jewish state, but even so, it's a big step to make to go from Canada to make Aliyah to Israel. What was your primary reason for doing so?
I fell in love with the culture. I went to Israel for the first time at 12 years old. And in high school and university, I tried to go as often as I could. I went on another few trips. I spent an entire summer studying in a religious girls' seminary and doing an archaeological dig. I spent another summer working as a researcher for a few different entrepreneurs. Every opportunity for an internship I could find, I took, and I fell completely in love with the chaos, with the noise, with the vibrancy. I just felt like everything was so alive, and I still do. I've been there for nearly 14 years, and it's still a place that can surprise you at any moment. And I also fell in love with the fact that I could be Jewish in any way. I could be a woman in any way. I could be myself in any way there. I wasn't limited by the community in which I was raised. In Toronto, had I stayed, I probably would have stayed in a very similar community with always the same friends and the same neighborhood. And this was a chance for me to explore anything and everything.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And just share with us your experience, what it was like to study at Tel Aviv University to do environmental studies, and did that really did start your career and drive into kind of environmentalism?
I was inspired to study in Tel Aviv because their program looked fantastic. It was one of the few in Israel that really combined both environmentalism but also the social justice aspect. It brought in students from all over the world, and I thought that was fantastic to also hear their stories. It definitely helped my professional career, but the environmentalism started earlier. I had worked at the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development, and I had spent a year living in Nepal, working in an area highly impacted by climate change. And those experiences brought me to the environmental program. I realized I needed a stronger foundation in the science. And Tel Aviv, I'd also never lived anywhere other than Jerusalem. I'd never worked anywhere other than Jerusalem. So this was my big opportunity to see another part of the country, and no regrets. The campus is incredible, the professors were wonderful, and it really broadened my understanding of all these different issues and how it relates to us.
And for our viewers watching today, just want to unpack what it means to be an environmentalist.
Mm-hmm. It's a great question, and I think the answer is different for every person. For me, being an environmentalist is caring for the planet we have. We have one planet, we all share it, all people, with all of our plants and our animals and microorganisms, and it simply means being a better caretaker of what God has given us. Environmentalism for me is also caring for the people on the planet. If we don't have a healthy planet, we're not going to be healthy. We need to work together with the natural resources to have better diversity of food, to have healthier air to breathe. So I can say that I'm just doing this for the animals and the plants, but I can also say selfishly as a human, I want to live a better life. And depending on which environmentalist you ask, you might hear one or both of those answers.
Yeah, and when we look at the history of Israel, it's extraordinary to think that the north of Israel, the Galilee region, which is kind of the breadbasket of Israel, was once swampland and marshland, and how the early pioneers, many of them died of malaria because they drained the swamps, and then they planted eucalyptus trees that would drain the swamps. Just share with us the whole innovation and the history of Israel and the early pioneers of the state, and how they did incredible things to actually build the state of Israel together with its ecology as well.
Another great question. Those first pioneers, the chalutzim as we call them, they were very concerned both about malaria, but also wanted agricultural land. And they drained the swamps thinking that that would get rid of malaria, and it would also create spaces for them to grow more food. Ultimately, it had disastrous environmental impacts. It meant there was less swamps or waters for many, many different species of plants and animals to grow. It was less area for birds to fly through on their migration south and then back north, less food and water for those birds, and less healthy resources for us people as well. It didn't take too long for people, for these new Israelis, to realize that they needed to bring back some of the nature. The organization I work for, the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, began already back in the 1950s. So if Israel was founded in 1948, already by the 50s, people were working to bring back nature and to protect what was still left. So some of the swamplands have been restored, and a lot of nature sites have been preserved even as far back as the 50s, 60s, and continuing today.
Do you want to talk about Israel's climate and Israel's ecology? Because, you know, Israel is, as you know, and many of our viewers know, a very small country.
Yes.
Put it in the UK equivalent, it's about the size of Wales, or in the States, the size of New Jersey. But there is so much in that, packed into that small country. I mean, you've got the mountains in the north with the Hermon Mountain. You've got the Golan Heights with all the green and the mountain around there. You've got the Sea of Galilee or the Kinneret. You've got the green plains in the north in the Hula Valley. And then you've got the deserts. And the variation of different climates in Israel is extraordinary, particularly then going down to how diverse the Dead Sea is to the Red Sea in the south. So just share with us the incredible ecology that Israel is. And the forests, not forgetting the forests as well.
Of course. We like to say that you can take a helicopter ride in one day all across Israel and see everything. Israel is actually what is considered a global biodiversity hotspot. It's only 3% of the entire planet are areas that are very, very biodiverse, a lot of native species, but also a lot of species at risk. We have in Israel 3.5% of all the known species on Earth, which we are so tiny, as you just said. I haven't been to Wales yet, but we are tiny and we have 3.5% of everything on Earth. We have, as you said, the forests. We have incredible forests, also different types of trees in those forests. We have deserts, which are incredible habitats. The north of Israel, these volcanic plateaus, the Dead Sea, the lowest place on Earth, and all these brine pools. And one of the largest wildernesses in Israel is actually the seas, the Mediterranean, the Red Seas, and all the diversity in those coral reefs, in those in the methane seeps, in the spawning grounds for fish. You can come to Israel and see almost anything. Maybe not a wild tropical rainforest, but pretty much everything else is on the table, which is spectacular.
No,
and it makes us important.
No, absolutely. I can definitely testify that. And Faygle, Israelis love hiking. They love their nature parks. Share with us what your favourite part of Israel is. I know that you're currently living in Jerusalem and you actually manage this incredible park that I didn't even know about called the Gazelle Park. But share with us what your favourite part of Israel is.
It's hard to choose. I love everything, of course. I really, really love the desert. The Ramon crater is stark and it's almost this totally different environment. It's kind of like being on Mars. But I probably would pick the Carmel Mountains near Haifa, the hiking up there, the views of everything. It's also a little bit closer to the weather I like, a little bit cooler, a little bit higher.
Yeah, I studied Hebrew at a kibbutz there, Kibbutz Ein Shafet, which is really close to the Megiddo Junction.
Ah, lovely.
So I know those forests very well.
Amazing.
And up there is very, very special to me. And Fayle, you are currently the operations manager for a Gazelle Valley in Jerusalem. According to my notes here, this is Israel's biggest urban nature site and home to the endangered mountain gazelle. Mm-hmm. Tell us how the concept or the vision behind the Gazelle Nature Park developed, because Jerusalem is it's a thriving city, and then in the midst of it is this beautiful park that you manage and you protect the mountain gazelle. So just share with us the vision behind this park.
I love the story of the park because it's a story of normal people, just everyday people like us. The park was a big open green space. The neighbors would go for little nature walks. And then the city started to become more developed. The Begin Highway was put in the 1990s, and that highway brought a lot more cars. The neighborhood started to be built up, which brought more dogs, more jackals, more cars. And this group of gazelles, a herd of just over 30 gazelles, started to be hit by cars, eaten by dogs and jackals. They were being decimated. And the city of Jerusalem then started to entertain some more development plans to build more buildings in this valley. And the local residents, our neighbors today, said, no, we are not going to let that happen. It resulted in a nearly 20-year battle, fighting against the developers, fighting against or with the city to protect the space, to give it the official status of a protected nature space. And in 2015, we opened up the park as an official nature space, conservation space, and it is completely due to all of the work done by our neighbors, just people that wanted to preserve the nature. The valley itself has incredible historical value and archaeological value. We know that there were orchards in the time of King David and the time of the kings of Israel. We have the archaeological evidence, and to lose the history, to lose the environment and ecology, it would have been a huge loss for everyone.
Excellent. So let's have a look for ourselves. Gazelle Valley Nature Park, and this is a big surprise to me. I've been to Israel so many times, Jerusalem so many times, but I've never been to this park. So this is now on one of my lists when I go back.
Hi there. Welcome to Gazelle Valley. It's Jerusalem's newest urban wildlife park. a part of a new initiative of the Jerusalem municipality and the neighborhoods around us that decided that this beautiful place should stay open, free access, full of wildlife, and you're more than welcome to enjoy it. Come on. Gazelle Valley is not only about nature, it's about people. And this park would have never been opened without the people that live around this valley. Community created a design framework that enabled to create a program for a park here. And this program was approved by the planning authority. And not only that, the Jerusalem municipality made sure that this dream comes true. And what you see here is the way the park actually is a part of the water system in the city. All this water that is used in the park for biodiversity and recreation is based on runoff water that comes from the paved streets in the city. This is where it's basically collected in a big reservoir and then recycled, purified, and becomes a habitat for birds, for insects, for a lot of wildlife, and of course a place that attracts a lot of people. Respect nature, treat nature well, it will treat you back the same way.
Yep, for so many of our viewers like myself who've been to Israel so many times, been to Jerusalem so many times, but haven't been to the Gazelle Valley Nature Park, I think this is a priority that we'll go and see it because it looks amazing, particularly with those gazelles. Share with us, Faygle, what this actually means for the residents of Jerusalem to have their own nature park right in the heart of the city of Jerusalem.
It is one of the most amazing spaces for residents. We are close to many bus lines because we're right in the middle of the city, which means people of all backgrounds are able to come. We are open every single day of the year, with the exception of Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement, and we are open for free. We also have material in 3 languages, English, Hebrew, and Arabic, which also helps encourage people from all backgrounds. The space is green, it's quiet, it's a wonderful space for meditation, for family visits, for doing yoga or reading or writing a book, and for obviously getting to know nature. And we've seen, especially in the last year, just how many people are coming to us for a little bit of green and quiet. Also, it obviously keeps the city a little healthier. Having all the trees, having all this greenery around is very good for the environment. And it's a place that encourages animals to stop, to visit, to eat, to refuel. So it's been a big part of a lot of our different animal migrations and animal habitats as well.
Yeah. And tell us the story about the mountain gazelle and why this is so important for Israel, and why in the midst of Jerusalem there's a park that is actually where the mountain gazelle can actually flourish.
Yeah, so first of all, the mountain gazelles, they are an endangered species. There's not so many left in the world. It's primarily Israel, with just over 1,000 left in Turkey. So we are working very hard to protect them. And one of the reasons we value them so much is their cultural and religious heritage. In the book of Daniel, it's mentioned twice. The land of Israel is the Eretz Hatzvi, the land of the gazelle. We have archaeological evidence again of gazelle bones that have knife marks from ancient people eating them 40,000 years ago. We know that they've been part of this land and its story for many, many years. The ecological significance, they eat grass, dry grass, so that helps prevent forest fires. We want them to stay around. We want them to help keep the city safe from potential fires. And there was a natural herd. There are lots of green swaths of Israel called these ecological corridors. They're in all parts of the world. And this area of Jerusalem used to be connected to one of these ecological corridors, but building the highway cut it off. So this herd of gazelles that could have roamed freer was now stuck in this one particular area. And then as development continued, Now we only had this one herd in one area, and if we didn't protect them with the park the way we have, we might have lost them forever.
Amazing, amazing. So let's have a look at this wonderful video that's produced by our friends at Bridges for Peace, and this is Tom's virtual tour of the Gazelle Valley Nature Park in Jerusalem.
You know, millions of tourists come to Jerusalem every year, and they visit all of the holy sites. They visit the cool things in Jerusalem, and for some bizarre reason, nobody comes here. This is a city park right in Jerusalem. It's a nature reserve right in town, and it's called Gazelle Valley. Gazelle Valley. Now, quite a number of years ago, I lived up on the top of that hill over there, way up at the top, and we could see down into this valley from our apartment. And would you know, every once in a while we would see gazelles go beside our house just out in the wild. And at first there were 9 of them, and then after a while there were 7, and the number kept getting smaller. And I was really unhappy about that because I found out that they were being hit by cars. Well, evidently the city of Jerusalem found out about that, and they said, we'll make a safe place for these gazelles. And they did. This valley right here in front of us, they made it, blocked it off, put high fences to keep them safe, and opened it up. There's a water flow in the valley, so they had everything they need, and they lived here safely as a nature reserve. Well, eventually they made it into a city park, free entrance, so anybody can come here, and it's astonishing to me that nobody does. But today we're going to visit Gazelle Valley. Okay, seems how the name of this place is Gazelle Valley Park. There are gazelles here, there's lots of them. You gotta really keep your eyes open because you're liable to see them, I mean, literally anywhere. There are a lot of them in this park. Originally there were 7, I think, when they started, but they rescued these gazelles from literally all over the country. One day I was looking just right over there, and there were 3 of them that stood on that little road right over there, and they stayed there for quite a while. We were able to kind of watch them for a while, and then they jumped and ran away. They run. They're so beautiful when they run. It's not just about the gazelles. There are other animals. They're here. It's a nature reserve, so there are lots of birds. It's a bird sanctuary. We've actually adopted some of the birds that belong at the Jerusalem Zoo. And there's water, so there's other kind of water animals, some special kind of toads and frogs, some green frogs, and they're interesting. There's people who have said they've seen a few other species that I don't know about. They do have some of the world experts that come here because it's a nature park right in Jerusalem, and that's really special.
That was an excellent video report there produced by friends at Bridges for Peace, and I've got loads of other excellent videos you can see on YouTube as well. Faygle, we focused on the gazelles and rightly so, an endangered species, absolutely beautiful to look at when we looked at those videos. But share with us about the bird life there, the insect life and the other ecology that you have at the Gazelle Valley Nature Park.
Gazelle Valley is incredible. Of course, Gazelle Valley, we have approximately 250 species of birds that fly through Gazelle Valley annually, which, considering Israel has just over 530 species of birds, that's nearly half of what we have flying through the country. They stop at the valley because we have a little wetland environment. We have the river system, the lake system, and for a lot of birds, that provides their last source of water on migration as they're heading south to the desert. We have a very famous tortoise rehabilitation program. Israelis back in the day used to find little tortoises on hikes, on walks, and they would bring them back into their house because tortoises are cute. But it is now illegal to have them in your home because there are less. They are protected species. So we are one of only 2 places in the country. With the government, we run a rehabilitation program. People can bring us their tortoises. My team does health checks. We put them through rehabilitation. The Rehabilitation Center is one of the big attractions of the park, especially for children. They can get right up close to a tortoise. We have a few different species of snakes. We have other mammals, usually smaller, like hedgehogs and moles. We have a lot of spiders and ants and tons of butterflies. It's really, really incredible. You can come, and this isn't mentioning, of course, that we have over 500 species of plants and flowers and trees, lots of fruit trees. People can come at any season and just see a lot of different plants.
And when is the most beautiful time to visit the valley? Is it in the springtime when all the flowers come out and it's greener?
Most people love it in the spring because it's vibrant green, it's gorgeous, it smells amazing with all the almond blossoms. It's a little bit more difficult to see the gazelles because the grass is so high. I personally love the beginning of winter. Just after the first rains fall, it's a little chilly, so you want to wear a nice warm coat. And it's also part of the bird migration time. So you also just get to see a lot of birds.
Excellent. So share with us what your role is with the Gazelle Valley Nature Park, actually managing it. What do you do on a daily basis and what are the challenges that you face? Yeah, I know you love your job. I know you love your job, that's obvious.
Oh, it's always fun to try to explain what I do on a daily basis because it depends hourly what needs to be done. Some days I am working with our volunteers or our national service youth. I'm teaching them how to work in the field, teaching them how to use the different tools, taking them out to the different sites, and doing the hands-on conservation work that needs to be done. Some days I'm working with our partners. We have amazing support from the City of Jerusalem, the municipality, who own the land and own the site, and we are helping to manage all these plants and animals. So I work with the city and their caretaking team. Sometimes I'm working with research partners at different Israeli universities, at the Geological Institute, to make sure that everything is healthy and happy. Sometimes I'm going out and I'm photographing. I got pictures today from my staff of a daddy longlegs, a type of arachnid that had just had all her eggs hatch, and there were little babies everywhere. And we just go out and we try to photograph because that's such a powerful educational tool for the public, not all who are able to come, especially if they don't live locally. So we share online a lot of the work we do as well.
Amazing. So you're also involved in something called Startup Nature. Now I've heard of Startup Nation with Israel's startup companies, but this is Startup Nature, creating wetlands for a million of migrating birds in Israel. Share with us the importance of this project.
This is an incredible project by the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel. The idea is to basically take former fish ponds that we're not using anymore to farm fish, and rewild them or turn them back into marshes, into wetlands and ponds, wild ponds. And with that, and that of course includes bringing in people to help plant all the local plants and bring in the water, the birds started to come back. And that's part of the goal. As I said before, we are on the migration path for about 500 million birds annually, flying from Europe and Asia through Israel, this tiny little plot, to get through the desert to winter in Africa. So we are the last place to drink water for these birds, and we are the first place after they cross the desert. So having these fish ponds, having these former fish ponds into wetlands basically provides many, many millions of birds with somewhere to drink, eat, rest, relax a little bit. And with all of that have started to come back insects and fish and reptiles and even mammals like otters. It's just been a huge success. We currently have 2 sites in Israel. One is even on the border with Jordan, and there had begun to be talks with Jordan about expanding that property over to their border to have an even larger space and to take our model and use it there, because they can see just over, I've been to the site, you can see right over, look at all these birds, it's amazing. Look at all these plants, it's amazing. And that's a big goal of nature as well. Nature doesn't know borders. So why not share all this incredible nature with everybody in the region?
No, absolutely. And of course, Israel is in that special geographic location, really in the center of the world. And you see the old maps of the Middle Ages. Israel's always in the center, particularly Jerusalem, where Israel meets at the crossroads of Europe, Asia and Africa. Share with us why this is such an important route for migrating birds and how privileged Israel is to be that crossing point for so many migrating birds, either flying into Europe or flying it from Europe back to Africa, like the swallows and the swifts.
Yes, the swift migration is such a fantastic story too. Basically, you have Europe, you have Asia, and Israel, again, this tiny little nation right in the middle. It's both on the Mediterranean, it's a land crossing, it just is a very natural space for birds flying in to be able to stop and to be able to rest as they migrate south and then return back up. And the bird migration is obviously one of the big ones we talk about, but other species, land-based animals can migrate, and also fish, water-based species can migrate. But the big one, because it's so visual and it's so well known, is the bird migration. And that's one of the ones we're really trying to focus on. We have 2 sites now, and we are trying to build another few sites as well to rewild about 25% of these historic wetlands that were lost. We want to keep regreening Israel. We want these birds, these animals, to have a place to live, and that will obviously just make all of us healthier for it as well.
Excellent. So let's have a look at this excellent CBN News Report. It's a few years old, but it's still excellent. Looking at the migration of birds in Israel, particularly in the north of Israel, in an area which is an outstanding area of national beauty called the Hula Valley, right up between Israel's border with Lebanon.
The Hula Valley hosts millions of birds and thousands of visitors each year.
This is one of the richest sites in the world for bird watching.
Israel sort of is a junction between 3 continents, and birds that are essentially trying to avoid high mountains, great expanses of water, they funnel through very specific flyways.
Some of these migrating birds fly 2,000 miles in 3 to 5 days without a meal. They fly from Europe and Asia to Africa. For many, Israel is the halfway point. That point is the Hula Valley, part of a 3,700-mile stretch from Syria to Mozambique. The Bible mentions the bird migration as part of a metaphor. Even the stork in the sky knows her seasons, and the turtle dove and the swift and the thrush observe the time of their migration. Some 400 species of birds stop for refueling, and a fraction even winters here, including 30 to 45,000 cranes. Listening to them talk, one can understand why King Hezekiah said he chattered like a crane. In fact, it's not just noise. Experts say crane parents and chicks can actually recognize each other's voices. 20 years ago, there were hardly any cranes here because the natural swamps were drained for farmland. The ground didn't work for agriculture, however, so experts restored part of the lake.
And the answer was essentially to give it back to nature. And so the project has gone sort of in a circle, and we are back to trying to renovate, trying to sort of reproduce what existed here in the past.
That and a special feeding project brought the cranes back, along with the visitors.
This is a wonderful opportunity for us to educate people about birds, about nature. I think that you don't need to be a bird lover when you are coming here, but you are definitely a bird lover when you are going out of this site.
Visitors to Agamon Hahula Reserve can ride the safari wagon into the midst of the cranes. Guides say there's no place else in the world to see so many cranes in such a small area. And bird watchers come from all over to see the phenomenon.
I don't even care if you like birds. You have to experience this and come and see thousands and thousands and thousands of cranes.
If you're a birder, I don't think you could find a better place to come to see the variety of species, as well as the atmosphere and the beauty of the place is just unrivaled in any place in the world.
For now, these cranes are getting ready for the long flight back to Russia or Finland for the summer. But they'll be back next year, along with the bird lovers. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Agamon Hahula.
So there, if you have a passion for wildlife, you have a passion for birds, what a better place than go to the Hula Valley. Obviously not the current time, as it's very dangerous right now, but we pray when this war ends, please do visit Israel, visit some of these incredible nature reserves, visit some of these incredible wildlife parks that Israel has, and particularly all these incredible birds that Israel attracts on its migration path. I have to mention, because Faygle, the important story of Israel's national bird, which is the hoopie. So it's a very colourful bird. There we go. It's on screen now. So tell us why Israel decided to choose this as the national bird of Israel and its importance and significance to Israel.
There was a big election, and all the Israelis, children, soldiers, everybody was encouraged to vote. And it was even something that schools got super excited, and they would divide students by classroom which bird they were going to vote for, and each classroom had to represent one of the birds. It was really a spectacular time for getting people to talk about animals and nature in Israel. The hoopoe was one of the top contenders. Some of the other big contenders were the Palestine sunbird. We also looked at the vulture. The vulture, for example, was deemed maybe a little too aggressive to be a national bird. So in the end, the hoopoe won, partly because of just how dramatic they look. I mean, they are incredible. They are monogamous, they are protective of their young, and that crown, the crest on top of their heads, tells you how they're feeling. So if they're a little bit excited or, you know, a little bit Israeli chutzpahdik, it's going to pop up, and everyone will know how it's feeling.
Excellent. Yeah, I have seen one in Israel. My friends live in Tel Aviv, and I saw one in the park one time. So yeah, stunning birds. And Faygle, can you also share with us some of the other rare birds in Israel as well? I mean, you mentioned some of the birds there, but share with us the real diversity of birds in Israel. Maybe some of the birds of prey as well.
Birds of prey, we have quite a few. We have buzzards and vultures, eagles, we have owls, we have all sorts of waterfowl, everything from, you know, a more common mallard duck to the globally threatened ferruginous duck. We have little passiforms, or the singing birds. We have lots of those. We have flamingos and ostriches in the desert. We have a lot of different types of birds, a lot.
And share with us in the 21st century, one of the biggest challenges for nation is actually dealing with innovation and technology, but at the same time also taking care of nature. Just share how Israel's at the forefront of innovation and technology and green technology that is blessing the world, that she doesn't really get the credit for that she should.
We are working a lot with solar energy and also wave energy, how to harness the power of the sea. With our solar energy work, we are building solar farms. For example, the Startup Nature program you mentioned has a new initiative called Tapuz, which is an orange, and it's buying up some of those fish farms, but now not just turning it all to wetlands, it's also turning some of it into solar fields. We do a lot of interesting work with green design, eco-design. For example, many of the design schools will award students a sustainability award. There's a lot of work being done on meat alternatives for a more plant-based diet to limit how much we need to, you know, farm cows, etc. So a lot of alternative meats. You can look at pretty much most areas in Israel and see something is being done in a more sustainable way. Even party planners. I know party planners that have turned their whole company into something a little bit greener.
Faygle, sadly I have to talk about October the 7th and the environmental impact that this war is having on Israel. But before we do, share with us where you were on this horrific day, the biggest mass terrorist attack in Israel that occurred back on October the 7th, and we're not far from its first anniversary. So share with us when you first learned about what happened, and also friends that you may have had actually in the south of Israel, because we know in the south of Israel there are some absolutely beautiful nature reserves as well that Hamas would have destroyed many of them, other people that work there.
I was in my own apartment. I was just getting up, getting ready for synagogue. It was obviously a Jewish holiday. And I was going to go to a new synagogue for the first time. I had friends who'd been encouraging me to visit. And I was all excited, and the sirens went off. And I've been in Israel for long enough to have heard them before. Nobody was expecting this. It was completely a shock. But within a split second, I knew that this wasn't an ambulance. This was something. The protocol depends which building you're in. In my building, we don't have a safe room. Unfortunately, we are one of the many buildings slated for renovation, which includes securing the building and adding a safe room. But I went to the stairwells with my neighbors, and all the neighbors in the building, all of us, some with their babies who had just woken up. We have elderly people, everyone just in the hall, totally confused. My building has a nice mix of Jews and Christians, religious and non-religious. So some of the people who weren't keeping the observance of the day started to check their phones, and there was already news. And because there were people in the building that were reading the news, we heard very quickly that there had been attacks. And the rest of that day, everything changed. I didn't leave my apartment. I wanted to stay. I didn't want to be out on the street if there was an attack. I didn't know what was going on. So I stayed in the area, and me and the other neighbors supported each other. I took out some of my books to entertain the children in the stairwells, and we just had to be there for each other. It was terrifying, not knowing what's going on, not knowing how and why it started.
Yeah, and what impact has October the 7th Hamas attack, and considering now new reports have come out that in the region of 7,000 Hamas terrorists together with residents of Gaza took part in the massacre that took place on October the 7th. What impact has this had on some of the nature parks in Israel and those that work for them? Because, yeah, sadly, many of those were murdered by Hamas on October the 7th.
So obviously it has a negative impact. War, if rockets are being sent and fires start, it can destroy nature. If tanks are driving through a nature reserve because it's in the war zone, the tanks are going to dredge up soil and the roots of the plants and animals that might be underneath. The people that work in these parks, they might have been murdered, they might have been kidnapped. Actually, one of Israel's big experts on scorpions is, I believe, still a hostage. And regularly the insect and arachnid group remind people this is someone we should be thinking of. It's had a big impact. It's had a very, very big impact. We also, for example, those gazelles, we knew that there was a group of gazelles living in Gaza area that now we don't know what their situation is. And one of the other really, really big tragedies of all this is packs of feral dogs coming out of Gaza are now entering more residential areas and attacking children or farm animals, wild animals. You don't know if they have rabies. It can be very scary to encounter a pack of feral dogs. So in so many ways, both fires and physical destruction or garbage left behind from a war or the change in animal cycles, everything can change.
And because a few years ago we saw that Hamas used these fire balloons where they'd set light to these balloons, send them from Gaza to Israel to deliberately destroy Israel's ecosystem. Share with us the damage that this did to some of the parks in southern Israel where these balloons landed and caused forest fires.
A lot of the damage was caused to agricultural fields. And obviously, once you lose food, that has negative economic impacts on the farmers. There's less food for people to eat. But because agricultural land is managed differently, farmers were able to recover a little bit faster than in nature. In nature, one statistic from sort of the earlier days of these fire balloons, these flammable balloons, was about 10 square kilometers of natural parks was completely destroyed. A really big victim of these fires were larger mammals. So deers or gazelles, foxes, wolves, animals would catch fire. They had nowhere to go, and a lot of animals burned to death. So that was pretty tragic. Obviously, we were talking about humans earlier, but those animals were an unexpected victim too.
Yeah. And explain the current situation in the north of Israel, because we mentioned the migration of birds, and that particular area of Israel is known for it, the Gazelle Valley in the north of Israel, which is that beautiful green area that's in the upper Galilee, on the border with Lebanon. And not far away you have the mountainous region of the Golan Heights. So share with us how all the Hezbollah rockets and missiles are causing problems this summer and its environmental impact, particularly in lighting these big forest fires that we've seen this year.
I can tell you that it's causing a lot of human impact. It's obviously less tourism, obviously can kill people. We've lost quite a few people in these attacks. Very tragically, some were Druze children in the north. Yeah. We do not know the environmental impacts or all the environmental impacts just yet. The assessments are being done right now. And those assessments being done by NGOs like the one I work for, the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, also by the Israeli government. Hopefully we'll have some of those results soon so that we can begin to really solve the issues. We do know that there's damage, and some of the damage is tank tracks, some of it is fires in areas that are being burned.
So let's have a look at this CBN News Report that looks at the tragic impact that Hezbollah rockets and missiles are having, not only on the lives of Israelis and the Druze community in the north, but also the impact it's having on Israel's ecological system, particularly causing these horrendous forest fires that occurred this summer.
Since the almost daily barrage began, life here is a dangerous and potentially deadly place. Noah and Ner Baranes died in a rocket attack July 9th, leaving behind 3 children. They're among dozens of civilians and soldiers killed by Hezbollah. Now, most communities along the Lebanese border stand nearly empty. Another casualty is the land itself, due to wildfires created by the combination of rocket fire and dry summer conditions throughout northern Israel, the Galilee, and the Golan Heights. The fires started by Hezbollah rockets have destroyed tens of thousands of acres and thousands of trees, some planted as far back as 60 years ago. These are the worst forest fires in the history of Israel. Itamar Katz leads forestry efforts on the Golan Heights.
I'm kind of young and I'm new in this system. I've only been in the Forest Service for 7 years. But all of the older generation, I mean, I see them, their whole life's work is going up in flames, and it's on purpose. I mean, somebody's doing this on purpose to us. It's not just happening.
This intentional destruction, reaching nearly 40,000 acres thus far, is just another part of Hezbollah's goal to drain Israel's resources, wear down its people, and eventually eliminate the Jewish state.
I mean, for us, it's huge. I mean, these fires here are equivalent to the fires in Northern California for us. That's how we experience it. Although it might be like a 1,000 or 2,000 hectare fire, which, I mean, it's big in any scale, but in Israel, it's huge.
And it's also destroying regional wildlife.
When fires starts in the spring, in the late spring, in the midst of the nesting season, then there's a real damage to birds. We're talking about chicks and nests that cannot fly. The parents are leaving, but the chicks are burning to their death, and the birds are losing a whole generation.
I feel like a refugee in my own country, and it's not a good position to be at.
Miriam Armon is among the tens of thousands of Israelis now living away from home. Before October 7th, her family had lived in the border community of Metula for 5 generations.
The Hezbollah started the missiles, launching missiles toward Metula. Many, many houses got hit, mine included. But because of the Hezbollah, the terror organization, now attacking Israel, it's impossible to live up north. The thing that is important that not many people knows about it, not many people understand the situation, that we just want to live in peace.
That was an extremely good report put together there by friends at CBN that looks not only at the human cost of these rockets and missiles that Hezbollah have been firing at Israel, but also the ecological damage that is doing as well to Israel's environment that is not taken into account when we see so much of our news coverage of the conflict. How does Israel rebuild after this, Faygle? We pray that this war will come to a swift end, particularly in Gaza and also in the north, and the Israeli people are free, and those 82,000 residents that fled the north are able to go back to their homes and they live in safety again. But show us the environmental impact of having to rebuild these damaged forests, the destruction done to wildlife because of these rockets and missiles.
It's obviously going to be a major endeavor. It's doing environmental assessments to see just what the damage is the damage surface level, is the damage deeper in the soil, in the roots, in the seabeds, because we're also talking about along the Mediterranean in the south. We have to look at who is out there. Are we working with volunteers? Are we working with professionals? Who is going to be coming out and planting the plants that we need to rewild? Who is going to be supporting this emotionally? And that's one of our big projects, is also ecotherapy, using nature and the healing power of nature to also heal society, because we're very well aware that there's a huge mental health crisis in the country right now. A lot of people are suffering from post-traumatic stress, both at the anxiety level and also at the extreme PTSD. And we are trying to bring people out into nature. And whether those people are taking calm nature strolls or doing nature challenging activities, 4-day adventures into the desert for teenagers that were displaced from their homes. So for 4 days in the desert, no cell phones, just nature, but also encouraging local Israelis to volunteer in rehabilitating these spaces. At Gazelle Valley, for example, we have many, many local volunteers that have started to come since the war because it gives them a sense of peace. It gives them a sense of calm to physically rebuild the land. And there are so many amazing organizations working now on rebuilding the sense of identity, rebuilding homes, providing people safe places to live with clothing, with food. And my organization is looking at it from that space, that environmental aspect. So making sure that we have a land, that we have a healthy land, and that we protect the land and the land protects us back.
And Faygle, for our viewers watching, and particularly those who are interested in wildlife and conservation and the environment, probably wouldn't expect this type of program on the Middle East Report. So it's good we've done something different today. But show us how they can support the excellent work that you and your team are doing in rebuilding and protecting Israel's precious nature reserves with the animals and the bird life.
Thank you. We would love to have everybody visit us, of course. For those who are able to come visit us in Israel, you're welcome to visit one of our many sites. Come by Gazelle Valley, say hello to me. We have many, many sites all across the country, and there are spaces to volunteer in wildlife rehabilitation or planting those marshes in the former fish ponds. There are also a lot of different ways online that you can participate. So anybody who isn't able to fly to Israel right now, I highly recommend you look at our website. In English, we have very regularly weekly webinars and Zoom lectures and all sorts of things happening in the English language. So it's easy to participate. We recently held one with one of the people on the video, Amir Balaban. He just led a whole lecture topic on the love language of gazelles during the Jewish Day of Love. So everything from the impact of war on people and animals to love in the animal kingdom. We have a lot of great topics, and that's a great way to get involved, just by learning.
Amazing. So let's go out before we finish the program with this excellent video produced by the Israeli government looking at 10 of the best nature parks in Israel. And this is the Israeli government's choice. So many people sadly forget to actually know how beautiful Israel is, and that excellent video there produced by the Israeli government is a reminder of some of the most beautiful nature reserves and parks that Israel has. And when we can all go back and the war's over, it's definitely a must to visit these nature parks. Down to the last few minutes of the programme, Faygle, and you've done a fantastic job in just expressing your passion and your love for Israeli wildlife and nature and the nature parks. But if we've got any young environmentalists who are watching the programme, what advice would you have them, and why it's so important to visit and support these wonderful nature parks? 30 seconds.
I think the biggest piece of advice is to be inquisitive. Ask questions, ask why things happen the way they do. Go out in nature, see it, smell it, touch it if it doesn't look too dangerous. Just experience nature and just keep asking, why do things happen the way they do? Why does an animal look this way? And you'll fall in love.
So Faygle, thank you so much for being my special guest on the Middle East Report. You've done a fantastic job, and you've got me even more passionate about nature and Israel as well. So thank you so much. And I want to thank you for watching this program at home. I think it's a reminder to look beyond the conflict and just look at some of the beautiful countryside and nature parks that Israel have. So let's continue to pray and support Israel and visit these parks. So thank you for watching this week's edition of the Middle East Report.